now we move to the speaker on animal law. I think it's a really exciting and optimistic time for animals in this country because the national consciousness has been, in the last year or so, quite awoken to what's going on. To talk to you about animal law, we have Angela Pollard. She is the manager of the Northern Rivers Community Legal Centre in Lismore, but she's also the convener of the Animal Law Network, which is a network that spans several community legal centres and works to promote animal welfare. It's my pleasure to introduce Angela Pollard.
Thank you very much. I was asked here because I gather that there's a need for role models around being progressive lawyers, and I was a bit disturbed at ever the thought of being a role model for anyone. When I was at Monash University several decades ago, I was certainly voted the least likely to succeed in the law, so please, this is not a role model. But if you have a passion for justice, and if you have a big heart, and if you've got a big mouth, then probably the work I've done over the last few decades may well be to some degree informative. I live in an obscure part of the world, but in that part of the world we progress justice. Well, I'm always very happy to be asked to speak about animal law and how it fits into the social justice framework. Oh, my thing. Just let me check my thing. Oh, good, I know how to do it. First of all, sorry, I do apologise. I should have acknowledged the elders and as custodians of this land, both past and present, so thank you. So after attending an introductory animal protection law workshop at a Community Legal Centres conference a few years back, I became obsessed about the injustices routinely and lawfully meted out to our fellow animals. I live in rural New South Wales, and so animals are a real and present part of my world. There are koalas in my talawoods near my kitchen door. Wallabies graze by my dam that is the home to native fish and frogs and to the much vilified cane toad. On my drive to work, I see hot, shadeless paddocks full of cattle being fattened for human consumption. Often, when I find myself behind trucks loaded with crates of meat chickens or pigs being taken to the abattoir. But even if I live in the inner city, animals, or at least animal parts, are ubiquitous. The feathers in the doona, fish scales that filter your beer, woolen clothing, shoe leather, animal-tested pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, zoos, racing, and obviously all that food. The use and the abuse of animals is fundamental to our society and our economy. I am heartened, however, that we are beginning to see the paradigm shift in public attitudes as animal activists expose cruelty in live export, intensive chicken and pig farming, just to name a few of the horrors. We need progressive lawyers. They're needed to challenge our manifestly inadequate animal protection laws, and I hope that today I can convince you that animal protection law is a necessary addition to the fight for social justice. And so on to the law. Animals are sentient beings. Animal protection law is predicated on the basis that animals are sentient beings, that they experience pleasure and pain, and are thus capable of experiencing suffering as a result of activities undertaken by humans. In 1997, the concept of animal sentience was first recognised in law in the European Union's Treaty of Amsterdam Protocols, which required EU member states to ensure improved protection and respect for the welfare of animals as sentient beings. In Australia, it took until 2004 for the Australian government to acknowledge the sentience of animals in its Australian Animal Welfare Strategy. So in theory, we have moved beyond the Cartesian model of animals as machines or automatons, with the squawks and squeals being a mere turning of the cog. Animals feel pleasure and pain. They seek out activities that promote their well-being and avoid physically or psychologically stressful situations. Chickens, when free to express their chickenness, will scratch, dust bath, and nest. Pigs seek out objects for chewing. They love a good wallow and a back scratch. Lions don't queue to jump through hoops, and horses don't actually seek out human beings to ride on their backs. but it may well be the case that dogs like to hang out with humans. For quite some time now, humans have taken it upon themselves to take control of their fellow animals, when and how they reproduce, what they eat, where they can go, and of course, how long they will live and the manner of their death. Animals as things. Under Australian law, non-wild animals are personal property. All animals, including wild animals without human owners, are things. None have rights. Australia is well behind such countries as Germany and Switzerland, which are moving away from the concept of animals as things. Under the German Constitution, which is known as the Basic Law, Article 20A provides explicit protection for animals in their own right. In New Zealand, we have recently seen moves to provide some degree of recognition of the non-thinginess of great apes. But back in Australia, animals are mere objects to be used for food and clothing, transport, entertainment, scientific experimentation, and cosmetic testing. Wild animals may have their habitats destroyed with impunity. They may be killed, or as we say, culled, where animals compete with human beings for natural resources. Despite the impact that human society has on animals, and despite the human use of animals in their hundreds of millions a year, animals do not have the right or the ability to access our legal system, to challenge these significant impositions on the qualities of their lives. Animals do not have standing, and there are significant impediments for activists who seek to challenge inadequate animal welfare laws. For those of you who are familiar with environmental law, which basically regulates how the environment may be polluted and damaged, so it is with our animal welfare laws. They actually regulate animal cruelty. For example, under the Model Code of Practice for Poultry in Clause 14.1, caged egg producers may lawfully dispose of unwanted hatchling roosters by dropping them alive into giant grinders. This practice is known as quick maceration. Under the same code, it is lawful to squeeze hens into A4 size spaces for their entire lives. There are a range of animal welfare laws that detail at what age it is acceptable to mutilate animals for agricultural purposes. Other codes and regulations allow a multitude of cruel but legal practices. We cut the flesh off sheep's backsides. We lop tails. We chop off testicles. We burn off beaks. We remove newborn calves from their mothers so that we can drink their milk. And we pour corrosive liquids into rabbits' eyes. Frankly, I could fill up the rest of this session just listing all the painful things that we do to animals. And it should also be noted that the majority of these procedures are performed without anaesthetics and on very young animals. But things don't have rights. There is no animal ombudsman, no animal rights commission, and no UN declaration on the rights of animals to ensure that animal needs are recognised and protected independently from human interests. However, there is a glimmer of hope. At the recent ALP National Conference, there was a resolution passed to establish an independent animal welfare authority at the federal level, and it was designed to act in the capacity of an independent animal ombudsman. Now, this was done as a sop for those ALP members that fought tirelessly to try and end live export last year. So basically, it was passed. I've spoken with the ALP members who lobbied so hard, and they said that at this stage there's no sign of any enabling legislation, no policy papers, no funding proposals, there's nothing forthcoming. So basically it was a pat on the head. So animals do not have the legal right to challenge the cruelty inflicted upon them. Prosecutions for cruelty are undertaken by poorly resourced animal welfare charities such as the RSPCA. The various state and federal departments of agriculture are also charged with animal welfare monitoring responsibilities, including developing codes of animal welfare. But this duty runs in tandem with their statutory function of supporting and resourcing the very agricultural industries that profit from intensive animal husbandry practices. A clear conflict of interest, I would suggest. Live export to Indonesia was restored within weeks, despite the horrific torture that was exposed and the incredible public outcry and the amazing campaigning. And only recently we were shown more footage. Nothing has changed. Right now it's going on in a lot of abattoirs in Indonesia, there's no doubt of that. When they introduced the changes, those changes didn't really mean anything. And closer to home, for people who may not be familiar with what was happening in New South Wales, the Hawkesbury Nepean Abattoir reopened 1 month after the ABC Lateline program showed footage of pigs being bashed to death with iron bars and animals being butchered while still alive in this country, in this century. These examples show that government and powerful livestock lobby groups work together in a cosy companionship to ensure that the law does not protect animal interests, even in the most egregiously cruel circumstances. And nosy animal advocates are not welcome. In New South Wales in 2007, Animal Liberation's investigative work into factory farming was curtailed when the state government excluded them from the power to commence prosecutions under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. They've been far too successful in their investigations, and they were able to get more successful prosecutions than the RSPCA and the Department of Agriculture and the police put together. Despite the fact that millions of animals are processed and killed each year within our intensive factory farming systems and our science labs, the vast majority of cruelty reports relate to companion animals or the more visible agricultural animals standing in their paddocks. Animal things that are invisible in the public eye are the most vulnerable of all of our sentient beings. It is only through the dedicated undercover work of animal rights activists that we often find the tests of the boundaries of legality, and that the public only ever really sees the real life of animals in labs, the battery cage, the sow stall, or the free to roam, not barn. So, animal law within a social justice framework, challenging the paradigm. So what has this all got to do with social justice? Well, I would argue that the current status and treatment of animals is a social justice issue. We must make the leap, the quantum leap, from our human-centred focus into a place where we are merely one of a myriad of species that share the planet together. Just as it has taken far too long for us to recognise that we exist within a finite environment where clean water, air, soil and species diversity are essential to continued human existence, we should now recognise that just because we can cause suffering to animals does not mean that we should. The dominant belief that humans are entitled to engage in lawful cruelty is based on our assessment of our superiority based on our brain power, which is handy because it's definitely a winner amongst animals. However, if instead we chose size, speed, agility, strength, vision, smell, hearing, teeth, claws, or fertility, we would be the inferior ones. It is no different to those misogynists who stack the decks against women by declaring the inherent inferiority of those humans born without penises.